A good friend of mine once created a video explaining how he theorized time travel works in the popular British sci-fi TV series that I'm sure most, if not all of you have heard of, Doctor Who. I'll make sure to leave a link to his video down in the description that's in the general direction of my pointing finger currently. Today, I'm going to explain why he's wrong. Microphone drop. I don't actually have a microphone to drop. I'm speaking with the speaker on my webcam, which is why all my movements are so weird and slow. Don't worry about that. It's going to be fixed in future videos. This was the most convenient way to record this video at the time. I'm getting ahead of myself. Anyway, I'm going to assume that you've all taken the adequate amount of time, no pun intended, to read the title of this video. Go ahead and cover it up. And first of all, I'd like to draw some attention to the format of this video. Yes, you can hear my voice. This is me, Brainy Diode, speaking directly to you through the microphone on my lovely webcam that I'm generally motioning towards. Hopefully this will become a permanent feature on my channel. I just don't have the correct recording equipment quite yet. I'm working on that. It'll be sorted soon. Secondly, this whole drawing thing that I'm planning on doing, it's not going to become a permanent thing on my channel. I just thought that drawing in real time, would really help make this topic specifically a lot easier, pardon my apparent failures in the English language, a lot easier to discuss. Secondly, I do think I went a little bit overboard in that introduction there. I'm not necessarily disproving Fropuff's theory per se. I'm just proposing one that I personally think makes significantly more sense. Now, a fair warning before we plunge in here. A lot of this video almost entirely is going to be based on theoretical physics. So not only is it going to be really difficult for a lot of people to wrap their minds around, I know I was very confused by it the first time I was learning about this, a lot of this stuff also is not proven beyond a shadow of a doubt. So we think this is true, but we're not entirely sure. Now that being said, I'm going to do my best to explain what the heck is going on here, and I would appreciate it if you would return that favor by doing your best to understand. Thanks. Now, I was researching Doctor Who one day when I stumbled upon an interesting tidbit of information. In a certain classic series episode, the Doctor states that the secret behind the TARDIS's time-traveling capabilities is the fifth dimension. Well, after some research and some conjecture, I determined that this is actually very likely the case. Why? Well, to understand that, you'll need to know what dimensions 0 through 5 are. Now, this is point. It's not actually a point, since an actual point has no mass, no volume, no length, width, or depth, and this has all of those. But this is the closest we can get to a visual representation of a point. Now, a point has 0 dimensions, has no mass, no volume, as I've already said. It's literally nothing. Now, say there was another point on this paper, also in 0 dimensions, and if you connect the 2 points, you get 2 unconnected points. Let's pretend that I actually connected to this point, which was obviously in existence long before this one, clearly. If you connect the 2 points, you get a line segment, which exists in the first dimension. It has length, but no width or depth. Now, if you were to draw 2 more points outside of the line segment and connect them, then you would get another line segment, and now these 2 line segments, both existing in the first dimension, create a 2-dimensional plane. A line segment or line and any point outside the line segment form a 2-dimensional plane. Now, 2 line segments don't necessarily make a plane, but these 2 do. Just go with that. If you need more information on that, I guess you can look it up. It's a little bit confusing, skew lines and all that. Look up skew lines if you need more explanation on that. But we have a two-dimensional plane here. 2 dimensions, length, width, no depth. So these 2 line segments are orthogonal to each other, or at right angles to each other, and these are in coordinate geometry, what we call the x and y axes. Now if we add a third axis, the z-axis, we branch into the third dimension. Now you obviously can't accurately represent 3 dimensions by drawing on a sheet of paper, but you get the idea. Notice that the z-axis supposedly is orthogonal. If it was standing straight up, the z-axis is orthogonal to both the x-axis and the y-axis. By now you should be noticing a pattern. The axis representing each new dimension is orthogonal to the axes representing every previous dimension. Well, it's a good thing that we're noticing this pattern now, because here's where things get a little complicated. Here I will draw for you the x, y, and z axes as mathematicians are used to seeing them. Here's x over here. I have to remember that you're seeing this upside down, as opposed to me. Here's the y-axis over here. That's a backwards y. Here's the y-axis over here. Ignore this. And here's the z-axis. I hope that looks like a z. Close enough to a z. Here's the x, y, and z axes as coordinate geometers. I'm pretty sure that's not a word. As mathematicians, people who work with coordinate geometry are used to seeing them. Now, if we had a 4th dimensional axis, let's actually use red to represent this, it would be logically orthogonal to all 3 previous axes as I lose the cap to my marker. But here's where the problem arises. You can't draw a line in 3-dimensional space, much less 2-dimensional space, that's orthogonal to all of the other lines that exist in 3-dimensional space. It's just impossible. So at this point we're going to have to start doing some heavy-duty imagining. Now each spatial dimension, the 1st through 3rd dimensions, allow the dimension lower than them to change. In fact, every dimension lower than them to change. So logically, a 4th dimension would be what would allow a 3rd and every lower dimension to change. And if we were to shrink down a 3-dimensional space into a single 0-dimensional point, how would we create a line that would connect 2 of these points? What would a line that would allow this point to change be? Well, it would be a line of time. It would be a timeline, per se. It's impossible to accurately represent that, but imagine this is the flow of time. Impossible to represent in a 3-dimensional space, but nonetheless, mental image is this. Now, this is why we often refer to the 4th dimension as time. But what would allow the 4th dimension to change? How do we get from the 4th dimension to the 5th dimension? Well, if the 4th dimension is a line of time, then the 5th dimension encompasses all the different other 1-dimensional lines branching off of this 1-dimensional line, forming sort of a tree shape. That's not going in the correct direction there. Forming a sort of tree shape, and that's the 5th dimension. The 5th dimension is all the different branching possibilities of this one single 4th dimensional line that we are a part of. So the 5th dimension is often referred to as probability. Now, through the magic of video editing, you'll notice that my 5th dimensional plane is suddenly facing in the correct direction. I apologize for that. I momentarily forgot that the camera is on the other side of the paper as me, so what you're seeing is the opposite of what I'm seeing. Anyway, to continue on, there's a really cool video series called Imagining the 10 Dimensions, Imagining 10 Dimensions, that I'll leave a link to down in the description, along with my link to my friend's video, and hopefully you guys can see that, and hopefully you'll enjoy it as much as I did. But, moving on, these are the basics you need to understand for now. So say you have a zero-dimensional point existing on a one-dimensional line segment. Let's just pretend this is a line. Now, well, actually, let's not pretend this is a line, because this needs to have endpoints for what I was going to talk about. Here's a line segment with a zero-dimensional point on it. Now, can we remove the point from the line segment without damaging either of the line segment's endpoints? The answer is, why, yes, of course we can. We just need to move the point into the second dimension. Now imagine we move the point over some and put it back on the line. This is the new point. This point is no longer here. Here's the new point that's on the line now. Now that we have that point on the line, imagine a hypothetical one-dimensional creature living on this one-dimensional line segment. What would that creature see? Well, to that creature's eyes, it would appear that this zero-dimensional point has disappeared from their reality and suddenly reappeared somewhere else. Now, say we have a two-dimensional square that has a point at the center. Can you remove the point at the center of the square without affecting the edges of the square? Logically, yes, you can. You just need to move it into the third dimension. Now, say you were to replace that point somewhere else on the square. If a hypothetical two-dimensional being was living somewhere on that square, it would, to their eyes, appear that the point has disappeared and reappeared somewhere else. The same logic applies if you have a three-dimensional cube that has a point at the center. Pretend that's the center. Let's make it actually look like a cube. It has a point at the center. You could remove that point without affecting the edges of the cube at all by moving it into the fourth dimension. Put it somewhere else in the cube, and a hypothetical three-dimensional being would see that point disappear and reappear somewhere else. Now, you may have noticed I used slightly interesting word choice there. I said a hypothetical third-dimensional being. This is because it's a common misconception that human beings exist in 3 dimensions, but actually we exist in 4. You see, to observe anything in our reality, we need light to bounce off of that object. You say we have a source of light to bounce off of that object and enter into our eyes over here. And although light is incredibly fast, that action does take time. There is a duration to that time, that light's travel. So we couldn't observe our reality as it is. We couldn't function the way we do. Indeed, we couldn't function at all without the 4th dimension, because every action, no matter how minute, has a duration. It takes an amount of time for anything in the universe to happen. So without the 4th dimension, reality as we know it could not exist at all. This is why we say that we're actually living in a 4th dimension, possibly even a 5th dimensional reality, which refer to the video series that I mentioned earlier, Imagining the 10 Dimensions, for a further explanation of that. Once again, they explain it significantly better than I do. Now, if you were to remove a point, or any item for that matter, from a 4th dimensional line, then what would a human see? Well, to the human, it would appear that the item has disappeared. And if you were to place, if you were to take an item out of a fourth dimensional space-time, any item really, but just for the sake of example, let's say we're working with, I don't know, a blue 1960s British police box. Just for example. Let's say we're working with something like that. Now, if you were to remove this item from a fourth dimensional reality and into the fifth dimension, move it around in the fifth dimension and put it back, what would a human like you or me see? Well, it would appear to us that the blue 1960s British police box has disappeared from space-time and reappeared somewhere else in space-time. It would appear that the box has moved in time and space. I don't know about you, but that sounds a lot like the TARDIS to me. So, now you know the theoretical physics behind time travel. So how do you move objects into the fifth dimension? The short and simple answer is, we don't know. I'll probably do some more research and theorizing and get back to you later on that with more info, thus the part 1 in the video's title, but it's highly unlikely that I'll stumble upon some major scientific breakthrough that scientists didn't come up with years in advance. But hey, in a world of 5 dimensions and infinite probability, who knows what the heck will happen. Maybe someday, with my help, you'll build your own time machine. Thanks for watching, and if you enjoyed this video, please visit my channel in the future for more facts, theories, and ideas, including a couple more Doctor Who videos I'm working on right now. See you then.